Brighton have just appointed the youngest manager that we've ever seen in the Premier League. And his tactics, they are so weird and so cool. And I'm not sure people are ready for the impact that he's going to have on the entirety of the Premier League. Shall we? Well, let's start off with the obvious. Who is Fabian Hurzeler? Well, similar to Julian Nagelsmann, Hurzeler's professional career ended at an early age and was thrusted into the coaching world early on. But his path to becoming a manager is still a very strange one, and the strange path that he took demonstrates itself in his style of play. In 2016, he left professional football and became manager of FC Pippinzride. Never heard of them? Well, that's because they are an amateur side who play in the second tier of Bavarian football. So in just 3 years, he had gone from playing alongside Emre Can and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg to managing at a ground that looks like this. Yeah. But his diligent work at Pippinzride didn't go unnoticed, as he took assistant manager roles for some of Germany's national team youth teams. 2 years later, he was given his big break by securing an assistant manager's role at St. Pauli. And St. Pauli at the time was seen as just surreal underachievers in relation to the size of their fan base and where they actually found themselves within the German league pyramid. And after years of finishing outside the promotion spots and even a few relegation scares, it felt like Bundesliga 2 was going to be their home forevermore and that they were bloody cursed. I mean, we all feel like that sometimes. But the moment of change came on the 6th of December 2022, where head coach Timo Schulz was sacked and Hurzeler was thrust into the managerial job on an interim basis. And this is where it gets so interesting from a tactical perspective. How did a manager who has a system that essentially has no midfield at times get the job, the main job, within 2 weeks? I'm about to show you. Right, strap in, my beloved football lovers. The guys who love the tactics, you love the way it gets broken down, and you love spotting new stuff because Hurzeler is bringing something very interesting and very new that I think on the channel we're going to dive even deeper on in time. Because these tactics are completely different to anything that we've touched on before on the channel. So heads up, these two heat maps are crucial for later in this video because they are not what you think. Have you seen them? Have you got a picture in your mind? What do you think that is? Which players are playing there? Yeah, you're wrong, I'm about to say. I'll tell you later. But first, let's have a look at the goalkeeper's distribution because it's so important. So, despite lining up in a 3-4-3 on paper, when it comes to the actual structure on the pitch, it is far from it because what it truly resembles is far more of a back four. And then, of course, we've got ourselves a single pivot here. Ha! We don't. It's not a single pivot. I mean, it is, but it's not what you think. Sorry, I'm getting excited. So you've got those fullbacks, and those fullbacks will stay high and wide. Now, we had more examples of them even higher and even wider, but what they will do is attack that space down those two wings and just get higher and wide as much as they can, moving into that space ahead of them. But that player in the middle, let's talk about him because he's the most interesting part, because that is actually the centre-back. That centre-back's initial position is right here. But he steps forward into what is more associated into a holding midfielder's role. But why is that? And where the hell is the actual midfield in all of this?
Where are you?
So these next two shots should help us to answer this question and explain why the differences between the first phase and the second phase of possession are just wild in Hurzeler's system. So firstly, this is the first phase of play where the goalkeeper is in possession, as you can see right here, and is looking for a central pass. And as we talked about previously, the fullbacks, they've gone high. Oh my God, they've gone wide. So what instead we see is this. There's a box that's been formed, and it's formed by the two wide centre-backs that we spoke about earlier on, a midfielder as part of the double pivot, and that centre-back that we talked about as well, providing that box and therefore a option for the goalkeeper to play a central pass, ideally, because ultimately those fullbacks are not going to be getting on the ball. And this, of course, is a principle that we've seen at Brighton with De Zerbi and other managers, of course, as well. But what I'm about to show you next is what makes it really different. It's where the system moves into the second phase of play. So here we have the second phase of play, and as we spoke about before, what is thought on paper when you can see the lineups is a back three. It's not. It's actually two wide centre backs. Now, essentially turning into centre-backs. That middle centre-back has stepped forward into what is, seen as a 6, but he doesn't have those same deep-line playmaker duties. You've got the fullbacks trying to stay as high as possible. But what's really crucial, and what we need to highlight here, is the position of the two supposed double pivot players, Jackson Irvine and Alosha Kemline. And it's their positions that are crucial here, because they are in positions where the ball can't really get to them. Now, keep in mind that these two are meant to be the double pivot of the side. So how do they overcome this? And why is this so clever and so brilliant? Well, their roles are as false 10s. They are always expected to be in the blind spots of the opposition midfield. And we can highlight that here. So here and here. And what that does is it lures the opposition midfield into a false sense of security, but also, I guess, a feeling of fear of not knowing where those players are as well. But the initial feeling, I think, for these midfielders will be that, they're okay. They're in a good position and they're shutting off the passing lanes to these two players. But the reality is so different. So let's have a look at some examples and show you why those heat maps that we showed you earlier now become so important. So those heat maps were the heat maps of Jackson Irvine and Marcel Hartl in their game against Osnabrück, who were pivotal in their side's success, but not as part of a pivot. Layered joke there. So to fully understand this, we had to dive into some fantastic StatHead stats and look at how their positioning meant that they became statistical anomalies for their positions. So this is a table demonstrating progressive passes received by midfielders in the entirety of the Bundesliga 2 last season. And look who's in 10th spot, Marcel Hartl. But why is being 10th in this metric interesting when it comes to midfielders? Well, every single player above him is a winger, not a double pivot player. So, for a player playing in a double pivot to be this high in the metric, it raises eyebrows. Mine in particular. So when looking for clues, this is a great clue. Why is he so flabbergasted? Well, this shot here and the subsequent ones, that it perfectly shows why this came to fruition in terms of the system of Hurzeler and how St. Pauli were able to be so dangerous without even playing with a midfield at times. So Jackson Irvine, can you spot him? He's actually over here, which is very interesting. He's moved over to the right wing. Meanwhile, Marcel Hartl is effectively playing, kind of as a striker, right? And the opposition are a little bit dumbfounded. Just ask the guy in the middle. Poor bloke. Well, this is actually purposeful. This is what Hurzeler is trying to do. And it all hinges on one thing, the position of the opposition's defensive midfielder. Hurzeler often instructs for his false 10s to pick up those free spaces around the opposition 6 and to use this as a guide on where to stand and which areas to move into, aka move away from the holding midfielder. And if you think of where those players would normally be, it just makes it very difficult for our boy here to feel comfortable, to know where both players are, and to help the team, essentially. So Jackson Irvine having that freedom and that ability to move over to that right-hand side and create an overload, what it does is it brings a centre-back over. And it displaces that defence, that back line. Because ideally, he would much rather be here. He would be much more confident in doing that. But because Irvine's come over, he needs to come over and help as well. It displaces the opposition defence and drags out that centre-back, which is okay because you would normally have your 6 who would be able to kind of come and sort out any problems that there might be. But that's what Hurzeler wants you to think, because they're going to create spaces in a very different area, a very important area, and an area that we talk about very often on the channel. And that area is, scream it with me, Zone 14. Now, Zone 14 is one of the areas where you want to get the ball. It's where a lot of goals, if you've been watching the Euros, of course, you've seen so many goals. Loads of goals from Zone 14. It's a very dangerous area of the pitch. And what Hurzeler is doing here is creating spaces on the edge of the box. And the positioning of the St. Pauli left winger here is actually really important, because he's asking a question. That's what football's about a lot of the time. If he's just staying out wide here and kind of making the pitch as big as possible, that's fine. That means the centre-back has to kind of look this way. But what he's doing here is very different. It's interesting. He's actually driving across a little bit, and it gives the fullback a decision to make. Does he go with him? Does he let him stay offside? Is he concerned about this player here? What's going on? That's what he's thinking. Poor Osnabrück. right back. Stick or twist. So in doing this, St. Pauli find themselves with an overload. And we move it on one more, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Because the pass is played, that overload is created, and once the ball comes in, you can see exactly what we're talking about. We have an overload, and essentially, let's be honest, between these two, you've got 3 here, and we've got, oh, let's get rid of that. We've got 2 players here, 1, 2, who have to deal with it, and that 6 is struggling. He's not really sure where to go and where to be, and it therefore creates an opportunity in a wonderful area of the pitch. And that overload in zone 14 is one of the rarest sights in modern football, I would say, but it all comes from the work of those false 10s picking up awkward, intelligent positions in relation to where the opposition players are, and then manipulating them into positions that they don't want to move into. It's really, really clever. I mean, think about this season. Think about the last season. The focus has always been central areas. Always, it's like you're not coming through the middle. And what they're doing is finding new places to move people about. And it's just super, super smart. It's kind of, I'm going to coin this phrase, it's kind of like a positional relationism, if that makes sense, in terms of, instead of going, where are the zones that I need to be, like you would see with, a Pep Guardiola side, it's very different in that sense, that it's far more about where is the opponent and how can I make life awkward for them. And that's a bit more creative, actually. It's really enjoyable to watch, and that's why that midfield is not always there. But that's only half of it. So interesting, this. Right. So when it comes to the wingers and strikers, they have really advanced roles in this team, and they are instructed to stay very high, to create those half spaces in the middle and final third, and to push opposition defences as deep as possible. And what I like as well is that despite his side playing out from the back for the most part, Hurzeler isn't 100% tied down to the fact that all passes must be short, and this is a really, really good example that we're about to show you now. Why it doesn't always have to be short. The ball is with the left-sided centre-back, as you can see here, and he's about to play a long ball to the striker. If we move it on one more, you see that striker get the ball. But if we go back to those initial principles of Hurzeler and this idea that it is a back 3, but of course it's so fluid and it turns into a bit of a back 4, what do we have? We have fullbacks. We have fullbacks really, really high, and that allows the striker to lay the ball off quickly, but also completely out of shot, of course. That winger is so high, they're able to move that ball quickly into areas of space and then move the ball up the field really, really quickly. If we move it on a little bit further forward, we will see exactly that. That pass has been able to be popped off, pippity-pip, and then pippity-pop to the winger. The winger is then able to drive, and it allows it to be played quickly to that right winger, who's already taken up advanced position. And on the other side of this, actually, you've got Dapo Afolayan, who you will remember, of course, from playing for Bolton. Can you see him down that bottom left-hand corner? He's taking up the parallel position. And that, again, makes it very, very difficult for the defence to not kind of get stretched and pulled apart. Also, let's remember our false 10s in this system. It allows one of that double pivot to be aggressive transitionally. And now they have 4-on-4 heading into the final third. And due to the attacking roles being free roles, their off-the-ball movements and combinations allow them to work the ball into a position like this. Wow. Utter chaos for the opposition. Fluid movement, creative movement, and just a sort of way of watching football that is fun. Interpreting your opposition and looking to hurt them the best you can. And that is all in the space of 18 seconds. And if you need even more proof that the false 10 system is a complete joke, I'd like to point you towards the goal involvements of Marcel Hartl. 29 goal involvements in 33 matches. Nobody had answers for him last season, and Hurzeler is about to do the exact same at Brighton, and it could get very uncomfortable for their opponents. There's been a few managerial changes. If you want to check out how those managers will set up at their club, click here.